We've got Martin in Georgia. Martin, you're on the line with Jimmy and Matt.
Oh, hi. Awesome. Great to talk to you guys. I guess I can just go ahead to get started.
Yeah, it says here that you'd like to argue that there's a higher probability for there to be a God compared to any other explanation for existence. I'm curious, Martin, like I asked Khalid earlier, do you have a specific God or religious thing? You don't have to defend it necessarily, but is there a specific God you believe in?
Yeah. Allah.
You're a
Cool.
Muslim?
You're
Yes.
Cool.
you're when you say probability, just so I'm clear, are you saying a calculable probability or like an approximation? Like I just think this is more likely.
I would say it's an approximation. I actually been calling back to you told me before I talked to you and Art, said rewatch the video. You asked me a specific question I failed to answer. So I didn't want to start off with that. Me give you verifiable evidence that is verifiable evidence to show that a God exists. And it was a yes or no question that I felt was kind of difficult to answer yes or no. So I figured I would answer yes, but just extrapolate on that point.
Cool.
I think you have to evaluate so many different factors. Do not just point toward the supernatural in itself, but with the combination of each of these factors, you could deduce that it may be more likely than for there to be something as a God rather than there to be, I guess just a naturalist perspective of nothing supernatural.
I'm going to stop and let you get started. We'll probably interrupt for clarity and everything else, but let me just say, if somebody said, hey man, I think I can demonstrate that it might be the case that maybe there's some possibility that there's something like a God and that might be more like, none of that is remotely impressive to me. And it's certainly not something that I could see advocating devoting one's life to, but make your case.
Oh, yeah, I think that's fair. I would say, and it'll go on all to my last one I say, but okay, first is the essence of existence itself. I think that this is something we talked about before, but I think got lost in the weeds when talking to both of you guys. But it seems like you guys may agree that something has to be eternal, but may not have to specify what that thing is. But you also seem to, I guess, have give the possibility that nothing is eternal, which I don't think, for me personally, doesn't seem like a rational possibility. And then consciousness in itself, our ability to understand what is what exists, and I think that its emergence points toward something that is greater than our own consciousness. And then after connecting these both existence and consciousness, and then speaking to, I guess, personal experience, that I think will can align together to make it there's probability for something being greater than what we can see physically on an everyday basis by evaluating all of these things. And then I guess
Martin, real quick,
of others.
Because we said the clarifying thing, you're saying too that specifically this thing that has to be greater would also necessarily be supernatural, right? Because I believe in lots of things that are greater than us. I don't think you can escape physics, but you're saying even greater than physics, right?
Yeah, I think there's always something, and I don't want to debate semantics. I don't mean by greater something more substantial or something, but what I mean by greater is probably something that is so far further than our current understanding that we have to reach it in order to develop that understanding. of that.
Okay, we still haven't escaped physics.
I don't know better word than greater, but greater thing.
We still haven't escaped physics because there's still lots of questions about physics and tons of open questions still in physics that we won't know until we reach the answer. We don't know anything until we reach the answer. So I'm still unclear with it. It seems like you hold what everybody holds, the idea of there's more than what we understand. In fact, that's not even just a statement of angst. That's a demonstrative fact. We actually know a lot of the things we don't know. We know like what things haven't been answered, which mechanics. We don't know all of them, but we know a lot of them. We need to figure out this theory. We need a proof of the Goldbach conjecture, all these types of things. So we haven't escaped that yet, but you have a proposition that there is something greater than those things, and it is a God. And you seem to be relying on there's always going to be something greater. And yet, without you having said it yet, I'm positive when I ask you if there's anything greater than the God, suddenly your insistence there will always be something greater is going to go away. Then you're going to say no. Is that correct?
You are correct in that.
Right. So your statement that there's always something greater, you don't actually believe that. You do believe in a greatest thing, and that is the Islamic form of Allah. Yes?
Yes. Yeah. So there is a greatest thing. That would be correct.
Right. So you've appealed to the great feeling of there's always something greater. You've then admitted you don't even believe there's always something greater. You do believe in a greatest thing, but that humans have this feeling of when they look out at the universe, that they feel very small compared to the rest of the universe. You have not yet demonstrated a necessity for there to be that greatest thing, and that greatest thing would be a God, and you definitely haven't gotten close to the Muslim God.
Okay. So I think that's where I think you have to tie in the other things you know about reality.
Sure. How about this? The story of Moses is untrue. We know that about reality. Now, go ahead and affirm the Muslim God with that.
Sorry, you're saying that. Okay, what part of the Moses part do you want me to explain?
No. You're saying when we look at other things about reality, you believe in the Muslim God. You're wanting to, I think, sort of abstractly.
He's not saying that any random fact affirms the Muslim God.
No. If we're evaluating the things we know about reality, to point to a God, he believes in a God, which the tradition of that God belief claims the reality of a certain historical event that didn't happen. So I'm trying to get him to reconcile these things at the same time. Do you want to give me the examples of the things that we know about reality that do point to the Muslim God? Because I can point to several that don't.
So, and I hate to give this explanation, but I think it's the one that's the most used. And just, I guess, in the religious and Muslim community is that the unexplainable things, like the splitting of the Red Sea, for example, would be believed in by faith. But I don't think reasoning. So
accepting that Moses existed at all and led millions or thousands of Jews out of Egypt where they were enslaved for the building of things in Egypt, which some people believe were the pyramids, some people believe other stuff, is entirely a faith statement. That story didn't happen.
And I hate to say this, I think we also can't just say that we know it for a fact that it did not happen.
We can say it with as much confidence as anything that we know for a fact.
It has
So, realistically, I think we could agree, at least it's possible two people from Israel were enslaved in Egypt and traveled back to Israel.
That's not the story of Moses, and that's not the Exodus. The story of Moses in the Exodus has specific claims about specific people in specific places at specific times. The problem isn't just that, could it be possible that there were some Jews in Egypt at some point and maybe some Egyptians enslaved, which, by the way, the whole story of Jews being enslaved by Egyptians while there are micro examples of that, is mostly just basically trying to bastardize Egyptian people in what might be humanity's earliest example of written racism. We also know, because of anthropology, what people were doing at that specific time and specific place, where Jews actually were, where Egyptians were, what level of slavery and who they enslaved, when they enslaved people. It's not just a matter of could it have happened there, is it couldn't have. Unless God's out here changing anthropology to trick us like the Mormons believe.
No. I think from the Islamic view, we wouldn't say that the Exodus isn't explained in the Quran as it is in the Bible. We wouldn't say that hundreds of thousands of Jews traveled north to go back to Israel because of their enslavement. It doesn't even specify the size of a population, and it doesn't specify the number of days, how long, the way, and besides the method that they got there. It doesn't go into detail as much. So
yeah, the Quran mentions it many, accepts it as a historical fact, as well as things like Noah's flood, as well as things like a literal Adam and Eve, as well as things like a literal Abraham, all fiction characters that many people in many religions have accepted are metaphors and are stories because all of them are essentially impossible. In Adam and Eve, it's not just essentially, and in Noah, it's not just essentially, demonstrably impossible. Abraham's the one you have the best chance at shedding any level of like, well, maybe there could be a one person that at around this time all Jews are related to and had that many kids and whatever. That's the best one you have a shot at, and even that one's not a very good shot. But anyway, you were going to tell us the things you know about. Why don't you focus on because the amount of time I could spend on why the Abrahamic religions are untrue is the rest of the year. And we're only in January. So instead, you said there are things about reality we know, which then affirm the Islamic God. Go for it. Share those things.
Okay. So I think we start off primarily with the fact that there is something that exists means that that thing, or we existing, the universe existing, it's either eternal in itself or is brought on by something eternal. And then I think we go into an understanding of
wait, how do you know that?
Being conscious. Sorry?
How do you know that? You said you gave two options. The universe is either eternal or was caused by something eternal.
Yes.
How do you know that?
And this is where I say the primate claim, because I don't, and you could obviously claim that this is an argument from incredulity as well.
Then maybe don't bother making it, because I already know what you're going to say.
Yeah.
Why would you acknowledge you're about to make a fallacious argument and then make it?
That's why I tried to. I think
it's honest.
It's more so basic reasoning that, like, if I told you,
it's not basic reasoning to accept a fallacy. If you're going to be honest and say I'm about to make a fallacious argument, you should also then understand that the argument fails.
The correct position is that the unit. The correct. Hang on.
Yes.
What fucking planet am I on? A true dichotomy is that the universe is either eternal or it's not. When you say the universe is either eternal or brought on by something eternal, how did you rule out the possibility that the universe was brought on by something that wasn't eternal?
Well, then it would just be a nonstop.
That's not what I asked, Martin. You said either the universe is eternal or it was brought on by something eternal. First question that I have, and I have a follow-up. First question I have, and I have a follow-up, is how did you determine that the universe wasn't brought on by something that's not eternal?
because the thing that is, if that thing was not eternal, then it would just be an infinite regression.
That's not a fucking response, Martin. Martin, you don't get to rule it out because it leads to an infinite regression. Because now your answer is either the universe is eternal, or it was brought on by something eternal, or was brought on by something else that leads to an infinite regression. So now you've got three. How did you rule out that the universe is eternal?
Yeah. So maybe how did I come about that the universe is not eternal? I guess if you're saying that it is eternal, the universe is eternal. That's something I was claiming.
You have no idea. So here's the thing. You said the universe, either the universe is eternal or it was brought on by something eternal. Then I pointed out, well, how did you rule out that it wasn't brought on by something that's not eternal? Oh, because that would lead to an infinite regress. Oh, well, that doesn't matter. So now there's the universe is either eternal, or it was brought on by something eternal, or it was brought on by something that's not eternal that may or may not lead to an infinite regress. And then I asked, how did you rule out the proposition that the universe is itself eternal? How did you rule that out?
Yes, the universe itself can be eternal.
No, when I ask you how you fucking rule something out, you don't get to say that it can't be eternal. Okay, that can't be the answer. I just ruled out your answer, Martin, because that can't be the answer. How you like them apples?
It's worse. He said can after taking a different proposition. He didn't say can't. He said can.
So now you're saying the universe can be eternal, and might not be eternal, and might be caused by something that's eternal, or might be caused by something that's not eternal that may or may not lead to an infinite regress. What the fuck are we playing at? Yes,
I guess
those are the options.
So either the universe is itself, and I would say the universe, the multi, everything that exists is eternal, or it was brought on by something.
He's already explained to you that that's not a dichotomy.
Martin, how are you going to
dichotomy?
How are you going to? I just gave you 4 fucking options to replace the 2, which you've already acknowledged. Hey, Martin, is the universe eternal or not?
Is it eternal or not? I think that goes into the probability. I think it's more probable it's not.
How do you determine that it's more probable that it's not? And by the way, if you're saying, what are you saying that you don't know whether the universe is eternal or not? Which is fine, because I don't know.
Yes. Yeah, I don't know. I think.
Okay, cool. Martin, hang on. You don't know if the universe is eternal, and I don't know if the universe is eternal. If in fact the universe is eternal, then we're done. But we don't know. If the universe is not eternal, then we need some potential cause for that universe. What can you tell me about the type of thing that might qualify as the cause for a universe that's not eternal? Which feature?
I think it'd have to be. Sorry, but I think it would have to be anything. It have to be outside of the universe.
So you're saying that whatever the cause is, it's not the universe itself. You're really breaking up right now. We're having an audio issue where your line's breaking up.
Can you improve your signal? Get to a better place.
I don't know if you can.
It seems better already.
Hear me better now.
Yeah, go ahead.
Next to my. Okay. I would say. Okay, if you didn't, I don't know if you heard her first part, but the universe has to. Okay, something outside of the universe has to. Create the universe, to say, and then if the universe was eternal, at least something would set the universe into motion as we know it. I think we can only evaluate what we do have in our existence as we see it.
Okay. If the universe is eternal, we're done. You don't need to posit some sort of explanation. But if the universe is not eternal, and you're saying that it had a beginning, and I asked, what can you tell me about whatever would account for that beginning? You are basically saying it's not the universe. It's something other than the universe that serves as the explanation for the universe, right?
Yeah.
Do you know any other feature that you can confirm is a feature of that cause other than it's not the universe?
The other feature, I think, would have to be it has the capacity to create a universe.
So whatever caused the universe is capable of causing the universe. That's a tautology. I'm asking for features of that cause, not tautologies.
So I think the features of something, because of that cause, that feature has to have the power to create or to do something that gives us the degree of the universe as we have it. So that means the power of
You
that
literally have just
thing
said
is-
exactly the same thing. You've said that whatever the cause of the universe is needs to be capable of causing a universe. And when I asked for features of that cause, you said it needs to have the power to create. But that's the same thing. It has it.
Oh,
The
no,
fact
the
that it
power-
is the fact that it is capable of creating is what you're declaring as a feature, which is a tautology. What of the cause? What feature can we confirm?
it is existing outside of time. It
How do you know that?
Wow. We can confirm that?
How do you know that? Because my understanding is that existence is necessarily temporal, and it's not possible for something to exist outside of time, because if there's no time, then it exists for no time, and the thing that exists for no time is identical to that which does not exist. But even I'll just grant you, let's say that whatever created the universe exists outside of time, even though that's a completely nonsense phrase. You have no way of confirming that, but what's another feature of this cause?
It can observe the universe as it,
No.
I would say.
Why is being able to observe the universe a feature of the cause?
I would say it was not able to see, or I don't want to use like human personable language, but
You are at every instance. The observe requires that something has the capacity to observe. That is an act of an agent. You got a long way to go to justify this.
And then once you get there, the thing that's blowing my mind about today is we're having person after person call in with a belief that is not deism, but they're basically trying to appeal to deistic arguments to then conclude when that's sort of their affirmation where they go, because this makes sense in my head, this arrangement of these, the words in this order, it all makes sense. This word problem, it all falls into place. And now I make the even larger leap to believing in Islam or Christianity or whatever. And it's even once you get past the gap, even if we did what Matt just did for you with one of your arguments and granted you this whole argument, you would then have even more work to prove the God for which there are actual claims about, there are actual features that are attributed to it. And it's a nonsense God. And so I keep getting like, I'm sure I look bored to people. I'm sure people are going to say I've been extra rude this episode. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of comments just about like, wow, what a jackass Jimmy was today. But it's like, we're sitting here trying to get you to understand you haven't demonstrated shit. You haven't shown that you have a basic understanding of shit. You've basically done poor man versions of William Lane Craig level apologetics, but for Islam instead of Christianity. And even if you got it all right, and we all came to the actual true position of, if that God exists, there's no way to know it exists. So let's go ahead and say that's what's true here. It's an undetectable God. If it exists, it's impossible to find out. Now defend Islam. the gap would be so much larger. And yet it seems to be this thing that you've called in to this show feeling you can stake your belief system on this thing you clearly don't understand. And you're making statements about existing outside of time. I don't, this episode, it's funny because we've had so many theists this time, and yet I think I'm more frustrated on this episode than ever. So Martin, do you have Matt, I shouldn't, that's rude to you. Matt, do you want to stay on this line of questioning and see if he has anything just to establish a God, or could we either decide to move on or ask Martin if he'd like to actually defend the actual God he believes in, which is Allah, which is nonsensically unrelated to actually the proposition I think he's defending right now?
I'd like to finish a particular line real quick.
Go ahead.
Which is, you're claiming that whatever caused the universe, when I'm asking for features of it, you list features that are essentially tautologies, that, well, it can't be the universe itself, and it needs to be capable of doing the very thing we're talking about. And the one feature that you kind of jumped in on there is that it has to be able to observe the universe. And the point I was making is that the second you say the cause can observe, you are anthropomorphizing the cause and giving it the features of an agent. Because, for example, if the cause of a fire in my house might be faulty wiring, but and obviously there's a lot that goes into it, but we could say, house fires are sometimes caused by faulty wiring. That wiring is a cause that does not have to observe anything. It has no capacity to observe. And so if you're going to go for, let me give you features of the cause of the universe, you have to be very careful, because the second you inject causes or inject features that are synonymous with or imply that it is a thinking agent, that's where you're smuggling God in. Because the whole point is to say, is it possible that there's some causal explanation for the universe that does not require a thinking agent? And your answer seems to be no. I want to know why.
Yeah. I think that's a very good point. My thinking is no, and I'd say it's probably related to my understanding and teaching of what God is, and that's probably primarily where I'm getting my arguments from. But so I'll preface it with this. So my understanding is that God created the universe, and it exists outside the universe. It can observe it all, and it's all loving and all these natures. But the evidence for those things, I would say, is within the existence of the universe. I think you have to obviously have that belief. So I can't tell you. I say no that those attributes, as you just described, I don't think I can defend with the existence of the universe alone. And then I would probably further say that consciousness, and then the second point I was going to go into, also can be explained by some I can't say the word, but non human like mind causing consciousness to emerge. So
actually, I would say I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. I'd say I don't know as well. Right. It can't
cool.
say.
So if we don't know,
and then
I have to follow up on something you just said a minute ago, which is, you said, my understanding is that God did this. That's what we're trying to prove. And the question you have to ask yourself is, since you just went to, you have an understanding that God did this, how is that understanding of yours, which I would call a bias, so how is that not a bias that is massaging where you follow the evidence and what you think is more likely? If you already have this understanding that God did it, then aren't you always, as long as you have that understanding, going to find God to be the most probable explanation? I mean, if I already believed in a God, then God is, by, in my worldview, the most likely explanation for everything.
That, yes, I would say first I wasn't born with the bias. I don't think, but
does that matter?
Developed that bias
Does that matter?
my understanding.
Pardon, does it matter? Is anybody born with a bias? Was there any reason to think that whether or not you were born with a belief in a God, that was relevant to whether or not a belief in a God is going to bias your search?
Sorry, it wasn't indoctrinated in myself personally.
Okay, Martin, is there any reason to think that whether or not your belief was the result of indoctrination impacts whether or not it's a bias?
So I would say I personally, I don't believe I started off with the bias that, God created the universe in the manner in which we have it. In the manner I explained, I wouldn't say that I had that bias before.
It wasn't the question.
When you started figuring out, the whole point of this call is that you are saying there's a higher likelihood for there to be a God than other explanations for the universe. And you're saying that you have an understanding that God did this. And I'm asking, how can you rule that out as a bias? Because I don't have that understanding, and nothing you've said has convinced me, and nothing you've said has come close to convincing me. Nothing you've said is anything that should convince anyone, because you've had fallacies called out, you've flawed reasoning called out. And then when I point out that you have a God belief, which could act as a bias, you're like, well, I didn't start with that belief. Well, I didn't start with that belief either, but I used to have that belief, and I got rid of it because it's a bias. How do you know? How you say your understanding is that God did this? What is your understanding that God created the universe based on?
So I think that's where it feels personal experience and testimony.
So the thing that everybody uses for all of their religions, and you can't actually point to why yours is exclusively the correct one, is the thing.
Yeah, we're at a point now, Martin, where I think probably, especially because Jimmy's tired of this one too. Let's call back and talk about it another time and think through some stuff, because if you're just going to say, I'm convinced for personal reasons from personal experience, well, I don't think for a second you think your personal experience should convince me. I don't have any way to validate or verify your personal experience. And I think I'd almost bet that if you told me what your personal experience was, even if I believed that you are adequately and accurately describing what your personal experience is, I'm pretty sure it still wouldn't convince me.
I'll actually tell you, Martin, what the two questions are you should prepare to answer when you call back, if you call back when I'm on. The first one is this. Let's pretend you're you. Go back to baseline 0, because you were talking about all the biases and whether you had it or not. You're going to go back to baseline 0. You're going to probably want to answer this now. Don't. Think about it. Call it next time. Go back to baseline 0. I don't hold a belief in a God. I don't think there's a God, or I don't believe there is or there isn't a God. What are the first most compelling reasons that you believe you would be drawn back to a belief in God from that ground 0? Then the second question is this. Let's grant you the argument that there was a first cause, not a first God. I don't believe that, but if we grant it, how do you get from there to Islam? Specifically, the first cause was the Islamic God, even if we agreed on a first cause or a person, a creator causer. Those are the questions I'm going to have for next time, but I'm genuinely spent. 35 minutes later, we've got a couple theists waiting. We generally try to end the show in about another 20 minutes or so. So I'm personally spent on this one.
No, thank you. I wrote those questions down, and
cool.
I appreciate it.
Cool. Thanks, Martin.
See you, Martin.
Hello, I'm Jimmy Snow, executive producer of The Line, and I only became a woodworker for the puns. That's not important. If you would like to support this channel, you can do so on our Patreon or as a channel member, and you can actually support specific shows and specific hosts in special tiers on those. Check those options out. Also, you can leave a super thanks and get a little highlighted deal. But if all else fails, you can always you can subscribe and leave a comment. Now, here are some suggestions because I don't care about the algorithm. I am the algorithm. Bye.